Thank you very much. Hi, Satish. This is a real digital event with you online. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much for having me remote and good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I just want to share one insight. We have lots of CIO, CTO kind of profiles on this panel. Sorry, Akrosh. Sorry, we missed Akrosh.
I just got the updated list. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Akrosh Sharma. He's Senior Vice President Merchandising at Carrot Lane.
Sorry,
My
Akrosh.
apologies.
That's a data error.
Okay, thank you.
It happens. Okay. So I just thought I want to share some insight, right? We hear to a lot of CEOs from fashion business, and most of CEOs you see today are all coming from sales, marketing, or product background, right? Does that make sense? How many of the CEOs you have seen from this background? Product, sales, or marketing? That's been their profile. Raise your hands if you agree with this. Most of the CEOs are in this background. Now the future could be very different. And there's one brand which is actually doing it globally, which is Nike. Nike is the first brand globally to appoint a technology person as the CEO. Close to 40 billion brand. Now this brand is always 10 years ahead of many of the D2C brands. So I'm seeing a lot of leaders of future CEOs on this panel. So please listen to them with a lot more care, right? And that's setting trend of how technology can transform. We saw Shein. We're going to see a lot of that through this panel. I'm going to get started with, maybe it's a question you've heard through yesterday, but I just want to ask their perspective in the panel one by one, which is last year you saw, huge shift in digital business. COVID has helped. One is, can you share your experience of that period? And did you actually really capitalize on that opportunity? Quick.
So, yes, for Spyker, with respect to the mainly D2C business, coincidentally, we were slightly ready, I would say, to tackle that COVID scenario because our vision of our founders was to bring technology into and imbibe into our Spyker DNAs. And that started in the earlys of 2019. So when the COVID struck, we were somewhat ready with our technological support. So yeah, that definitely helped us grow our online business, and for Omni business we grew 4x. So yes, it did help us, and so a lot of different parameters like integrations, partnerships, making your products available at a lot of different platforms, making your own brand website Omni enabled, that really helped us in doing this.
Got it. Dharmen, what happened in your business? Because you run something very unique, multi-branded formats.
So Ganesh, for most of the traditional retailer, brick and mortar retailers, till 2019, digital means ERP, WMS, order management system, omni-channel to some extent. But 2020, COVID accelerated the need for real digital transformation. We banked on Excel sheets, which we have started reducing our dependency on Excel sheets. We are using a lot of AI-based solutions to make those decisions. And we're using a lot of, digital means to reach out to customer. Snapchat is an enlightenment for me, but we've been moving away from emails and SMSs from very long time now. Actually, after 2000, started from 2020 only, when we had limited budgets and every dollar, every money that we wanted to spend, wanted to have a maximum ROI. So we moved to a lot of digital means, and a lot of them, I can go on speaking.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, but we moved out from SMS and emailers. We moved on AI-based CRM, which actually reaches out to my customer on a social media platform and drive them to come to my stores with a very strong ROI of 40x. My performance marketing is very ROI-based, AI-based, which I am acquiring new customers. All that mediums are helping us spending whatever smaller means. Every retailer had very constrained budget. But 2021, August onwards, we have started the BTL activities again. We're opening new stores again. We are expanding as normal, but then the learnings of digital is incorporated now, and the blend is now phygital in real sense.
No, absolutely. Not only going digital, but also bringing intelligence into the decision making through that process. Wonderful. Yeah, Akrosh.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Carrot Lane is born online, so a lot of our DNA has been that tools or digital solutions have been a part of our life. What changed for us in COVID? There were two things that changed. One, I think COVID gave people a lot of time, and people invested that time online, right? Because COVID essentially said you have a lot of free time, work is not everything, and said that you can't meet socially. So what do you do with that time, right? So you spend a lot more time digital, and that exploded digital inventory of attention. What that meant in the short term for all brands who were already online at that point of time was to expand their exposure as part of this digital inventory that was there. And for people who are digital forward, where you already have good experiences online and you're able to transact or connect deeply with the customer, it just gave you more opportunity to do that, and so the brands just exploded. And for those brands who were not online, it was an easy time because just so much attention is there online that people came on board. I think we took advantage of it. We grew. Jewelry as a category has done well overall, but we've really scaled the business. We're growing about 90-95% year on year in this period, and most of the credit for that has been to our capitalizing on this extra inventory available online. I think the other angle to COVID that has happened is in one go, the entire world has been forced to change, right? So people who are at the back end of the change cycle have now suddenly thrust into that. So a lot more people are comfortable transacting online or engaging deeper with the brands online. So in that sense, I think omni-channel has become a lot deeper, even post-COVID. So while post-COVID, there's almost like revenge shopping going on, like people want to visit the stores and really meet others and so on, and yet digital interactions have also gone up for the same customer. So what we are seeing in the business, for example, is deeper browsing. The same customer is looking at more product online, is looking at spending more time on the website, is engaging a lot more, talking through different channels with us. And then the comfort of shopping is the same omni comfort that the customer had pre-COVID. So that's really, there is a slight tilt towards online, but brick and mortar remains the most comfortable space for people to transact. And so I think the entire digital journey has become richer. And like the earlier speaker said, that gives you so much data that you can just run your business from that deep understanding.
Got it, Akrosh. In fact, we work with Akrosh and Carrot Lane, and the kind of growth that you're seeing, we don't see in many other online platforms in the country. And this is an organization we see data is used really in decision making. For the kind of stuff that you see Akrosh talking about is depth of browsing. Now you will not know that unless understand the clickstream before and clickstream later. So that's the level of depth we can go into, and they definitely are setting benchmark in the online business as what is possible. Over to you, Satish. I think you bring a perspective which is very different, aggregation of brands of different genres, different age groups, the Gen Z to the mature. So if you can just talk us through what happened in the portfolio.
Sure. Thanks, Ganesh, and good morning, everyone. Yes, you're right. Arvind Fashions is a conglomeration of multiple brands and caters to a wide variety of market demographics. And what we essentially went through in the early part of the COVID was a discovery phase, in terms of where we stand with respect to because when COVID had hit, we were almost in the middle of, spring, summer 2020, as we call it, right? We work on a fashion life cycle, which is spring, summer, and autumn, winter. At least a good part of our merchandise actually prescribed to, these two broad seasonal windows. So we had, a significant amount of purchases and, supply chain activities which had already got initiated during this time, right? So it was a question of, how do you handle, the balance between shut shops and making sure that, your inventory turns are not going to get deteriorated and you're able to make good out of it, right? So there were several actions that were done over a period of, I would say, May to December last year. But the most significant ones were actually looking at some of our brands as, core online brands, or which has the largest affinity to online, right? And in that context, we had, Flipkart, who actually co-invested on the Flying Machine brand with us. And we formed a new entity, Arvind Youth Brands Private Limited, where Flipkart, backed with Walmart, was essentially, the special purpose vehicle for carrying the assortments, for communicating the market insights with respect to the design, especially, above the keyboard dressing and all the trends that were going on. So that was one, significant, I would say, change in, in the way we were actually channel sharing our revenues, happened as early as July 2020, right? So that's first thing. But collectively, if you look at it, with a combination of market share that we could divert to multiple B2Bs who eventually had, their own set of smaller distributors and retailers whom they could cater to in the localized markets closer to the consumer. We were able to, pull up our revenues, from a kind of, mid to low single digits, which was pre-COVID, to as high as 35%. And that trend is only and this 35% I'm talking about, in the quarter that we recently published our results on. So that trend is only looking up, and I think this is going to become, more mainstream and a significant part of our revenue growth through the, B2B, B2C. And as you rightly mentioned, D2C is not always about, going and, because in our kind of business, that might not always be possible to connect to the consumer directly and deliver to each consumer. But having these channels in a more localized format, personalized for those type of demographics, and then ensuring that, we are able to plan our assortments and our entire replenishment cycles in tune with that, was a significant change. And this is an ongoing process that is still going on, fundamentally indexed on revenue growth through the digital channels.
No, absolutely. Satish, I think we also work powering one of your D2C initiatives as a group, very data-centric, very objective decision-making, and how you are all bringing the transformation in across various brands is amazing. And you also use the opportunity to create partnerships, right? I think it was a period of partnerships, right, where co-owning some brands with a digital player. That's also some benchmark during that period. We'll switch gears, and we typically talk about what worked most of the times, right? I'm going to ask the panelists, what experiments did you do during this period which did not work? Because we learn a lot from what did not work than what worked. Therefore, if I can just go across, and whoever wants to go fast, what did you venture into which did not work, so that people don't make that same mistake again?
You mean what worked or
What did not work?
So what did not work was Excel sheets. So my planners were giving me data that we're overstocked, and there were presumptions on some past 6 months data, which was incorrect, right? We then changed our benchmark to 2019 as a benchmark year. Then also the expectation of sales to stock turn ratios was actually throwing incorrect data or unreal data. Our planning of merchandise was delayed due to this, and when we actually started going into productions, the labor issues was faced with every factory, and then the entire supply chain chaos happened for all the brands, including ours. So what we realized is some AI-based solutions. So we incorporated some AI-based solution. We use Power BI and Canvas to give us a lot of data that we can have a correct and or more correct planning. So there cannot be 100% correct projections and planning, but then the more accurate planning on how much we should know, buy, how much we should plan as a discount at a full price. I give you instance in 2021 when the unlock happened, our planners realized that there is a overstock of certain categories of women footwear, and we put it on a discount, and everything got sold off, and the factory was not supplying. So then immediately we became an understocked, and we started getting customers, and we didn't have product and on time. So those errors could have been avoided if I would have been using AI tool earlier, which I am now incorporating. My decisions are weekly, although my supply chain cycles are 60 to 90 days. But we actually have started working very aggressively with our factories and planners on the AI-based data that we are getting now. What actually, one more instance I will give, and many of the retailers will relate here. Post 2020 unlock, our conversion rates became 50% for retailers. And that was unheard of, unreal for most of the retailers, where 17, 18% is a very healthy footfall conversion. And we said it's an exception month, then it's an exception quarter. But when they continued, I implemented AI-based footfall trackers, which give me gender, heat mapping, NPS score of my customers. And when we realized the manual footfall that I'm getting is actually the footfall that my system is also generating. The only thing I can relate to then is my repeat customer is supporting me in my toughest times, and they are coming back again and again. Before 2020, I've almost written off that the loyalty engines or loyalty programs are defunct, no more are as a optimal solution for our brand. But then in 2021, after seeing the support of my customers, they called up on WhatsApp video calls or chatbots or all the mediums and bought products when almost we were closed, or we were open for few hours or odd even days. All those, hilarious restriction what governments put on retail, our customer kept on supporting us. That was the time we needed them most. And then now I've decided this month, October 2021, we launched a loyalty program for Lotus Sports. We launched a loyalty program for Sports Station as well. And that's where I think rewarding my regular customer is the optimal way I can get my customer back in the cheapest way possible.
Yeah, thanks, Dharmen. I think for putting some of you now vulnerable in this situation, because normally in panel discussions, we don't talk what didn't work, right? So let me go to Satish. If you can just, what are your brave experiments and which flopped?
Yeah, we did try a few things. I think the most important one was around localization of identifying, what are the set of end shoppers, attached to a particular pin code, and then, giving them some kind of, nudge through whatever medium, be it a WhatsApp or a SMS or whatever, and just making sure that, they actually get a landing page which is pretty much for that particular location, say a CMH Road, Indiranagar, Unlimited store, for instance, right? So that's almost like, taking the shop to their living room, right? Because of the situation we were in. So we did try that, and I would say that, it probably worked to a degree, right? I think if you ask me, these things also work for value formats like Unlimited, which we eventually exited this year. But this couldn't really be scalable for the more the premium brands and the beauty brands that were part of our portfolio to a degree that we thought it was replicatable, right? However, we did try an experiment with the value brands, and the limitation is essentially in terms of how much you can scale, because the fundamental premise of this experiment was that anyway the store associates at the store don't have any customers or shoppers to deal with because of the low footfalls. So why don't we kind of repurpose their time so that they can probably travel, 3-4 kilometers, and just deliver a packet based on what was ordered, and of course with contactless payment and stuff like that, and trial at home, all those were additional niceties that were added to the overall merchandising package and the shopping experience, which we really tried to carry it to the home of the shopper, right, essentially. So I think scaling was an issue, and it probably worked to a degree in value formats. It probably didn't work as much, or it was not replicatable, in larger brands.
Yeah, wonderful, Satish. I think these are all the experiments. One, we can learn from others' mistakes, which is to say, localization may not work in all places, but you would like to know more about what was the learning out of this. We may not have time here. I think please reach out to the panelists in social media. They'll be more than happy to share their insights with you. Akrosh, in your category, any failed experiment?
Tons of them, I think. Part of innovation is that you keep trying things and you keep failing on them and learn and then redo. I think the edges of failure happened across the board where we were trying to push the envelope on physical activities, whether it's the supply chain side or the sales side and so on. So, the traditional thinking is that if you want a spike in business, you just, load up inventory. And then the moment you go like Dharmendra said, that the moment you go into inventory and you say, dude, factories don't have workers, man, right now. So how am I going to get more inventory? How am I going to put more product? So what I have is what I need to sell more. And so then you go to the other end and say, okay, one of the ways to drive sales is call up customers. And then you say, yeah, but sales people, you have 30% people not present for various reasons. And so what do you do with that, right? And so I think those are the places which failed. What we were used to doing, a lot of our practices just couldn't continue the way they were. And so you learn out of them and then, go more digital and try different things. And obviously they may not have the same efficiency as earlier. But yeah, everything that was touching physical was failing for us in the last 12 months. It's only after wave 2 that it's, I think, last quarter or so that now it's become more normal.
Interesting. I think there's a natural tendency to push locally and make people and inventory move, etc. I just want to maybe now focus on a dimension of everybody in D2C want to acquire more customers, right? If you have to share one tip which worked for you really well, which is the acquisition technique for getting more consumers for their brands? Just one.
CRM.
Existing customers.
Making my customers come back to me, RFM analysis, repeat frequencies and monetary value, and making sure I'm reaching out to my customers again and again. Although the medium has changed, but maintaining the relationship with the existing customer came out to be the most important.
It'll be great if you can also say how you're doing it.
So how we're not doing now, or probably now, most of the last 18 months, we've not pushed a lot of SMSs and emailers. We used an AI-based CRM solution where we reached out to our existing customers through their social media handles. We could use some tools to connect to our customer through social media handles. In case they gave us their phone numbers or email IDs, we could connect through some tools on what is their social media handle ID, and we can reach out to them on the new offers. We showed different offers, different promotions to different customer sets because on the RFM analysis, and we saw huge, ROI on transactional terms, which was measurable. There were certain tools that we were using on CRM and marketing, which was not measurable. So we started spending on all measurable marketing tools. CRM came out to be the most optimal ones for us. We started at 20x ROI and probably now making around 30x to 40x ROI in most of our campaigns, and that too on AI-based social.
That's amazing. That's amazing. 20x and 30x is not typically you hear in the digital ROI, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to chase you.
And driving my customers through a digital medium to an offline store.
Interesting.
I'm not talking about bringing to my website. I'm
Got
talking
it.
about bringing my customer back to my stores.
Superb. Wonderful. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people chasing you for how you're doing that. And I heard something interesting on Spiker, right? Where what you guys did during that period. How did you acquire or milk the existing customers?
So we tried something unique, which is hyper-local business, wherein during the pandemic, I mean, there were warehouses were only enabled and certain areas where you have the high street stores enabled. What we did was we created a small micro websites for each of the stores, wherein of course there's no footfall at the store. So what to encourage our franchisee partners also, what we did is they always stores, all the stores normally have their own set of loyal customers. So we provided their digital website for each stores, wherein they used to target their own customers via email, SMSs or WhatsApp. And then the customer as such has tried the stores and the product. So he's aware of what the size is and he doesn't require the touch and feel for that moment. So what he used to do is he used to order it online and the order used to come back to the same store and used to deliver it via logistic partners. So that actually helped us a lot during the pandemic. And the major factor which helped us was the optimal warehousing operation support, wherein we had ramped up our warehousing operations and we tried to make the delivery at least in 4 to 5 days in that pandemic period.
Wonderful. Now, this is something very interesting, right? Every store was digitized and presented to the consumers through a local sales force, right? Again, scaling, a very simple but well executed. And what was the kind of increase you got in terms of business because of this?
So, of course, when you compare that to the overall Omni business, it was, to be frank, not that really great. But in that pandemic period, it helped us survive. We saw the online sales, the contribution of hyperlocal business was something around 25 to 30% of our overall Omni business.
That's not
That
small.
was pretty substantial for that moment. Yes, it is a tool which helps us in such kind of scenario. Now, let's see how the customers are evolving to that, because since the footfall has come back to it, but there are certain set of customers who really still want to enjoy that experience of shopping from home with their nearby local store guy. So that helps us having that feature along with us.
Wonderful. Now, a request to all the audience, can you please note down your questions now? We'll have maybe 1 or 2 questions with the panelists and then we will take your questions. We want to have at least 8-9 minutes of Q&A. Please ask and be ready with your questions. So I want to quickly ask Akrosh and Satish on one thing, which is, one is what has happened, COVID. A lot of people have heard about it. Now we are going through a recovery phase. If you can just share what's in your mind of what are you planning to do for 2022 so that we leave the audience with something into the future, right? One is what we have done. What should we be doing as we think into 2022?
I'll go first. So we have very strong plans for the next year. In last 18 months have been very encouraging in endorsement of our strategy. I'll just dial back a little bit. What worked for us in the last 12 months has been product innovation. That's led customer acquisition for us in a big way. Where the rest of the industry was still coping with just getting back on track, we were ahead with, we added 20% range to our offering. And that really has jumped us forward. And I think this is the way forward. We'll continue to lead forward with product innovation. We are known for a product company in our category. We are known for our design, for our price points and what we offer and so on. So we're going to go forward with product first, distribution to back all the demand that's coming. So we have an omni distribution business. Our online continues to scale very well. And we keep opening stores wherever we have interest online. So both the channels just work very, very well together. So I guess the playbook is there. We need to continue working hard, executing right.
No, this is wonderful, and this is something what Sanjeev Mohanty was saying yesterday about product is the hero. We're talking about a lot of tools and techniques, but the question is finally consumer buys product, right? For how do you use product as the hero and then use the other technologies to ensure that we connect? This also aligns with the PwC person who was there before the panel. Satish, your plans for 2022, tips that the audience can take away.
Yeah, no, I think our focus is essentially going to be on supply chain and more specifically on inventory discoverability. Because as we aspire to be a much more profitable company, I think one of the key things is how do you improve the stock turns and how do you make sure that this paradigm of global inventory is kind of made more practical in terms of maybe a local inventory, right? Global plus local inventory. What it essentially means is that we need to have a very strong digital capability to move merchandise across stores, subject to GST laws and so that you don't really end up increasing the cost to serve of the product. But have that visibility of both your active as well as the dark stores, apart from the warehouse inventory, so that your allocatable stocks at any point in time. And for us, this is a very important concept because we have about 850 plus stores spanning across 6 brands, and some of the largest brands have about 300 350 stores. If you really look at the stocking points and the opportunity to optimize the visibility and take decisions based on availability in each of these stocking points to serve a customer who's probably 50, 60, 100 kilometers away or maybe 400 kilometers away, depending on which state we are talking about, could actually mean a lot in terms of containing loss of sale, improving our sales through our stock throughput, as well as ensuring that we have a more vibrant store, because end of the day we want customers to walk into our store and get exactly the same experience as what they're seeing online, and nothing like providing that catalog experience of the online pretty much replicatable at store, and just by making sure that the inventories are identifiable and available to promise to the consumer. So I think a lot of work that we will do next year would be, in fact, I would say it's more of a continuum of what we're already doing, but the acceleration to that would be significant, as we go into 2022.
Wonderful. See, I think if
Can
you
I
just...
add on
Sorry,
this?
please go ahead.
So you asked what's in our mind for 2022 or the year forward. See, what's in our mind is to sense what's in customer's mind at right point of time. So our supply chain is 60 to 90 days. We used to plan 1 year in advance for our seasons. Now we plan 60 days to 90 days in advance. We are traditionally a sports footwear retailer, and sports, athleisure, fitness has become a trend after first COVID wave. But what we never sensed was open footwear, slides, shorts, pajamas. All these has, broken all the records that we've been selling. So we started changing our product, timeline, supply chain. I'm wearing shoes which is looking formal, but it's built on a running platform with a fly knit upper, so that I can still have the comfort, because from last 18 months we've been wearing those comfortable apparel, and going back to office, we still want to maintain, we don't want to wear formals in black and browns. So the entire requirement on supply chain on product is squeezed to 60 to 90 days product planning, and that's where we want to sense what customer is actually have in mind, and giving them seamless experience across all our platforms. That's what we are working on.
Interesting observation. If you just heard all three of them talking, I just got one question. What's your plan for 2022? None of them spoke one word about technology. Have you seen this? Surprising. We are sitting in a CTO, CIO panel. I asked them, what's your plan for 2022? They're all saying, I will improve, innovate, continue to innovate on product. One person says, I will think what consumer is thinking. Another person says, I will improve availability. So basically, technology is just means to get all these questions answered. They're asking some relevant questions, right? Questions are all business questions. So I think there can't be a bigger takeaway than, right, the technology heads talking about a business problem that they are solving. Then you see what technology that I should do to improve availability, to improve product innovation, or whatever. That was wonderful, right? I'm going to leave last 4.5 minutes to the audience. Please go ahead with your questions. Please make the best use of it. Make us very uncomfortable. Ask the tough questions.
Hi. So we hear that a lot of investment is happening close to consumer, okay, but very less on the product and merchandising side. So what is your take on it?
Yeah, the question basically is that, a lot of you guys are always talking about CRM, personalization, and all of that. Very few we talk about what do I do in product, whether design, buying, merchandising. Very less is talked about. Is that the question?
Uh, if I can take that. I think we have, I'll talk about Carrot Lane as a company, and we're about half and half split in our investments on the product creation, supply, demand prediction, and that space, and in the space of where is the customer, what is she wanting, where is it that she wants the product, and so on. And then some amount of money on merging the two. I think innovation is a seamless activity, just like businesses, that you have to do it both on marketing, which is the consumer world, as well as the product world, the merchandising. Each business will be at a different stage. Where we are right now, because we want to explode, because we want to grow like 70-80% or more year on year, we have to invest in all areas. So we may not have spoken about it, but it's very much there at the core of our plans.
So I'll add on it onto it. In fashion, lot of investment and developments are going towards sustainability. Lot of the dry fit fabrics or sweat absorbing fabrics have polyesters which are recycled. These shoes that you are wearing, the rubbers are some part 5% recycling is become a normal in any product or shoe that you probably see from Lotus Sports or any sports brand for that matter. Most of the brand are moving in their R&D towards sustainability now. And besides that, comfort, because I mentioned about fitness has become a norm and comfort has become a habit. So we're matching all the new developments and investment towards these factors while we're developing our new products.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, just try and add on.
Sorry, please.
So for Spiker, what we did is, being a casual clothing brand, it was always our customers felt that being a fashion promoter with respect to apparels, we also thought that probably our customers should also have some fashionable men's innerwear. Being a more men-centric brand, we were one of the triers or the experimenters who launched a men's undergarment brand in the pandemic, because we felt that that's what something was a need of the time. So we launched the brand in between the pandemic, and today is actually working very well. So here, if you try and probably visit the website or something, so the product has been more of a fashionable prints. The product quality is pretty from which uses less amount of waters. It's a long-lasting product. So this was a need when the people are sitting in the house and they really don't want to go out, and that's what was being consumed most in the pandemic. So that actually helped us with respect to new product innovation in that period actually.
Wonderful.
One more.
Is there one more question? I think last
Happy
one.
morning, panels. See, my question is little lengthier. See, in food and FMCG, there is especially post this COVID, there is a new category called vegan, and especially this hygiene category. Food habits, like people are gone back to the basics, naturals, very natural products, all those things. In similar lines, in fashion, apart from face mask, is there any changes in the category? Like, for example, I have a handkerchief. If I use that handkerchief every 1 hour, if I inhale or something, where it is a bacteria shirt, antibacteria shirt, or antivirus shirt, something like that. Is there anything that in future this kind of category is going to grow up?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very pertinent question. We have some short time, but I will just give you, maybe outside this we can meet.
Okay.
The biggest hygiene factor for fashion business, we are polluting the world. We are polluting the world so bad. We are just next to oil in causing a climate problem for this planet. Just next to oil. It's not the surface treatments which are the pollution. The biggest pollution is we waste a lot of fashion. More than 1 out of 2 products we make globally go as waste. Right? That is the waste we have to remove. I think it's a big problem. a lot of us are working on reducing that wastage. I think we should take this very, very relevant and important question. I don't think we are able
Thank you,
to
Ganesh, sir. Thank you so much.
justice and wonderful. Thank you all the panelists. Thanks Satish for joining us, sparing your time digitally. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
audience.
Thanks, everyone.